We good? Good morning. Welcome to Esther Lesson 2. If you're watching on the video, this should be chapter 2. And hi to the Wednesday night crew. I miss y'all. I hope y'all have a great night, just like we're going to have a great morning. So, one time, years ago, this was several years ago, in a whole nother state, my oldest son, who's the policeman, got a call to go help a young man who, I think he was like 18 or 19. So he wasn't little. He was, a grown man size, who had been pepper sprayed and ran off. So Tommy went to find him. Found him. Tommy was in his car, got out of his car because the young man was on foot, barefoot. He was barefooted. And he took off running from Tommy. Y'all don't run. So Tommy chased him. Long time chased him. And the guy was motivated. He wanted to get away. So Tommy caught him, tackled him to the ground, was able to take care of him. But in the meantime, Tommy himself ended up covered in pepper spray from head to toe, and had to go to the emergency room just to have his eyes cleaned out, to be taken care of. So, the point of my story is that sometimes the police end up covered in pepper spray and have to go to the emergency room. Now, aren't you full of questions? Like, why in the world was he pepper sprayed? Why did he run? Why was he barefoot? It was cold. It wasn't the middle of the summer. What happened to Tommy? Can he see? Well, Tommy can see if you know him, right? But I didn't tell you any of those extra details because they're irrelevant. They don't matter. The point of the story was if you go to the emergency room, they'll clean your eyes out and you'll be able to see. And then you have to wash your clothes a special way. Like, the point of the story is about the pepper spray, not all the details. But don't you want to know why the kid was upset? What if I told you it was his mother who pepper sprayed him? Why did the kid run away? Was anybody helping this family? Clearly something was going wrong, okay? I'll tell you later if you want to know. So, we're going to feel the same way about this part of Esther. But we need to remember one of our guardrails. One of our guardrails that we looked at last week was that this is a true story and it's told from God's perspective. Therefore, if we're missing details that we really want to know, it's because we don't need to know them to understand God's point. To get what God wants us to know, we're given every detail and fact that we need to have. So the ultimate point of Esther is not that we shouldn't join a harem, that goes without saying, right? Or plan assassinations, or make laws for 45 million people when we're drunk, right? We shouldn't do any of these things, right? But what we're to see in Esther is the providence of God in the lives of the individuals and in the collective people of God, the Jews, okay? So the point of the story is that we're to see the providence of God in the lives of the individuals. That's your first blank there, individuals, each individual character, and then in the whole group, the collective people of God. So today I'm going to break our lesson into two parts. We're going to talk about the providence of God for a minute, and this is going to help with the homework. And then we're going to look at the events in chapter 2, which is also going to help you with your homework. I'm trying to set us up. I'm teeing you up for a home run for this week. So last semester, quarter, what do we call them? Our last study on Ecclesiastes, we talked about the providence of God one week. Remember that? You get an A if you remember. So real quick, just by way of review, let's look at the definition of the providence of God. So this was Phil Johnson and John MacArthur were having a chat, literally, about the providence of God. It was at the end of Pastor MacArthur's life. And they said that providence is the doctrine that talks about God's care and governance for everything that happens. Okay, anything and everything that happens. And we kind of refer to it based on our interactions with the providence of God. It's either a smiling providence or a frowning providence, right? We just sang about that. But it's the providence of God, no matter how it makes us feel or how it seems to us. And then Greg Allison, in his wonderful little book, 50 Core Truths of the Christian Faith, he says, providence is the continuing work of God to sustain in existence the created universe and all it contains, directing everything toward its divinely designed end. So we can see the providence of God everywhere. Usually it's easier in hindsight, right? But it's always there. So just real quick, some Old Testament examples. We have Joseph. Number one is Joseph. He's kidnapped by his own brothers, right? The plan is to kill him, but a group just happens to show up who's willing to buy him as a slave. You know the story. He ends up in Egypt, a slave, falsely accused of attempted rape, imprisoned multiple times. He's forgotten till he wasn't forgotten. And then, long story short, he's appointed the second in command of Egypt, right? During this horrible famine in all the land, and God uses him to save his people, his family, who turns into the Jews, right? All right, number 2, Rahab. Real quick. Did the Jewish spies who needed immediate protection just happen upon a woman who acknowledged the one true God? It was not an accident. Number 3 is Abigail. Abigail. Did she just happen to run into King David, the king of Israel, when he needed help, he and his men, and saved him and her own family in the process? It was just an accident. Not hardly, right? Number 4, Ruth. We love Ruth. We love the story of Ruth. Did she just happen to end up in Boaz's fields? No. And then number 5 is Anna. I don't mean me. I always say that. Anna was the widow who dedicated her life to working in the temple. Her whole life, like decades, 70, 80 years of her life. Did she just happen to be in the right place at the right time at the temple that day and get to hold the baby Jesus? Was that just an accident? No, of course not. So all of these stories, that was just to get us thinking, show us the specific providential hand of God caring for his people. And of course, we see this in Esther too. That's what we're going to look at today. And of course, we see God's hand where? In our lives too, right? So, chapter 2. If you want to turn to chapter 2, it's page 2 of your notes, chapter 2. So we're still in the introduction part of our story. Chapters 1 and 2 of Esther are the introduction. The stage is still being set. We're still being introduced to characters and a setting and some themes, and we're still being given details that we're going to need to know to interpret the significance of what's coming up in the story. So let's look at Esther 2, verses 1 through 4, if you want to turn there. Esther 2, 1 through 4. And we've got a very sad king. And I mean that in every way. I mean, like, he's sad, he feels sad, and I mean that like he's pathetic. He is sad. Verse 1. I'm going to read 1 through 4 real quick. Sometime later, when the anger of King Xerxes had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what he had decreed against her. Poor thing. Then the king's attendants proposed, "Let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king, and let the king appoint commissioners in each province of his kingdom to assemble all the beautiful young women into the harem at the citadel of Susa. Let them be placed under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch, in charge of the women, and let them be given beauty treatments. Then let the young women who pleases the king become queen in place of Vashti." This suggestion pleased the king, and he acted accordingly. I wonder how long it took them to come up with this brilliant idea. So, let's look at some facts here, some details. It's been about 3 or 4 years between chapter 1 and 2. So rumor has it, the historians say that King Ahasuerus was either just done fighting or involved in fighting Greece at this time. That was going to prove to be a losing battle for him eventually, but most think he was distracted. And then you add in the time that all of this is going to take to go across multiple continents and gather beautiful, it feels like it happened overnight to us, but it didn't. So number 2 here, or is this B? Sorry, it's B. So 4 years, that it was 4 years. Next time I'll number these, that'll make it easier. It had been about 3 or 4 years. So number 2, he can't undo his own law. Remember, he's stuck. And this is an important fact because it's going to come up later. It's going to be very significant later on in the story. His anger has subsided. Does he sound sad or wistful? I don't know. Like, what have I done? I don't know. Am I reading too much into that? And then for C, I just want to point out that the plan that they come up with that makes the king so happy is immoral. It goes without saying, right? It is an immoral, evil plan. And then D. In verse 3, we see the word assemble. Go, let the king go throughout the kingdom to assemble all of the beautiful young women. So what does that word assemble mean? A lot rides on this word. And this is where you'll see a lot of the debate. This is where where you should feel like we don't really have enough information. Did they have a choice? Did these young girls have a choice or not? So that word means to gather, to collect. It always cracks me up because the lexicon says if you're defining the word assemble, they always use the word to define the word. It means assemble. But at every appearance of this word, it signals a movement from dispersion to ordered unity. So go get them, go gather them up. And it doesn't matter if it's grain or troops or exiles or the nation or the virgins scattered across it, The verb frames the action as purposeful and under divine direction. Someone's in charge and goes and gathers them all up. So, is this important? Did the young ladies have a choice or were they forced? Every commentator has a different opinion. So, I'm going to skip the technical grammar part of it that I thought was so cool, but we'll skip that part. Just know that the way the sentence is structured doesn't help. It doesn't give us a hint one way or the other. So let's see. I am, just for sake of time, going to skip through some of this. All right, so the suggestion here is that the characters are for sure caught up in events by some unseen force that has ultimate control. But their own personal opinion about their circumstances isn't given to us as the events of the story are moving forward. Just like my intro story, how did the young man feel? How did Tommy feel? Why did his mother pepper spray? Doesn't matter, because the point of my story was if you go to the emergency room, they'll flush your eyes out for you in a good way, okay? Really, aren't you dying to know? All right, part 2, Mordecai. Sorry, part 3, Mordecai. This is where we meet Mordecai. He's the good guy, right? So Esther 2, 5 and 6. Now there was at the citadel in Susa a Jew, and his name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Simei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been taken away into exile from Jerusalem with the exiles who had been taken away into exile with Jeconiah, king of Judah, or Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had taken into exile. So let's quickly look at some of these facts. Mordecai is a Jew. He's a Jew. That's number 1 there. Number 2, we're given his family tree. We see these all throughout the Bible, right? From Genesis to Revelation, we're being told who fathered who and who, all the way down. So number 3, he was in the second or probably third generation of deported Jews. He was born in Persia. He was not born in Israel, had never been there. He'd never been home. And then number 4, he traces his lineage back to Kish, who was in that original deportation. He lived in Israel and was deported, taken to Babylon. And I wonder if they did this a lot. Like, hey, I go back to so-and-so who was brought out of Israel. It just seems like a nice anchor that they would have. Number 5, he's of the tribe of Benjamin. And who else was of the tribe of Benjamin, which is number 6? King Saul. So right here, we're being given a clear piece of information that Mordecai is a descendant throughout the years of King Saul. And that's going to come up in the next chapter. It's going to be a thing. Okay, did we get all those? All right, let's look at Esther 2, verse 7. Mordecai was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther. So we finally get to meet Esther, his uncle's daughter for she had no father or mother. Now the young lady was beautiful in form and beautiful in appearance, and when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. Okay, so a couple of facts about Esther. Number one, she's Mordecai's young cousin. They're cousins. Number two, she's adopted by Mordecai. She lives with him. He's brought her up. And she still respects and obeys him. No one seems to know how old she was at this point, but she would have been young. I don't know why I'm picturing late teens or early 20s. She's not married yet. But she respects and obeys him there. For number two, she's being raised by Mordecai. She still lives with him. They're still a family. Number three, she was an orphan. We know that both of her parents are dead, but we don't know what happened or when. Did she ever know them? Did he raise her from infancy? We don't know. And number four, she's the only person in the story who has two names. I thought that was interesting. So Hadassah is her Hebrew name. That means something to me because I'm assuming that's what her parents named her, her Hebrew name. And then Esther was her Persian name. And it could mean star. The Persian word means star. Or it could be kind of a little play on words with Ishtar, sounds like Estar, right? Which they think could have been a nickname given to the queen by the Gentiles, by the Persians around her. And Ishtar, of course, was the goddess of love and war, which by the end of the story, she has proven herself to be. Not a goddess, I don't mean that, but the love and the war part is what I'm talking about. And then number five, she's what? Beautiful. Yeah, that deserves its own thing. She's beautiful. The NIV commentary says, according to the rabbis of old, she was one of the four most beautiful women in the world. And the three other were Sarah, Rahab, and Abigail. Now they don't know. But that's what the rabbis said. Sarah, Rahab, and Abigail. Okay? They loved Esther. Our Jewish friends still love Esther. But she's more than just a pretty face. Okay? She's more than just a pretty face. Verse 8. Now it happened that when the word and the law, so it was a law, how did the king feel about you keeping his law? The word and the law of the king were heard, and many young ladies were gathered to the citadel of Susa into the hand of Haggai, that Esther was taken, there's that word, taken, to the king's house into the hand of Haggai, who kept charge of the women. And the young lady was good in his eyes, and she advanced in loving kindness before him. So the legacy version actually uses the word for loving kindness there, which I thought was an interesting word, but it just means favor. She's advancing in favor with him. So number one there, this reminded me of the saying, you could just put, people liked Esther. She was beautiful, but they also seemed to actually like her. But it reminds me of that saying, good looks might get you in the door, but they won't keep you there. And we're also going to see this same thought come up in verse 15 and 17, that she was winning favor with people. They liked her. So he hurried to give her cosmetics and portions of food to her, and to give to her 7 choice young women from the king's house. And he transferred her and her young women to the best place in the harem. She went straight to the top, right? Esther did not tell anyone about her people or her kinsmen, for Mordecai had commanded her that she should not tell any one of them. And every day Mordecai walked back and forth in the front of the court of the harem to know the well-being of Esther and how she fared. Okay, so number 2 there, Esther was still doing what Mordecai told her to do. She was still obeying, and he told her to not tell anyone that they were Jewish. So this will come up in the homework for this lesson. So I'm just going to leave it there, but look for this question in the homework. And number 3, he checked on her every day. He was concerned. His concern for her seems very clear. He certainly could have walked out of her life. She's being taken care of. She's being fed. She didn't need him anymore. No, he didn't do that. He's still checking on her every single day. So verse 12. Now when it reached the turn of each young lady to go into King Ahasuerus, after the end of her 12 months under the regulations for the women, for the days of their cosmetic treatment were fulfilled as follows: 6 months with oil of myrrh. I would love to know what that actually does. And 6 months with spices and the cosmetics for women. A whole year. Then the young lady would go into the king in this way. Anything that she said that she desired was given to her to come with her from the harem to the king's house. In the evening, she would go in with the king, and in the morning, she would return to the second harem, to the hand of Shashgaz, the king's eunuch who kept charge of the concubines. She would not again go into the king unless the king delighted in her and she was summoned by name. That just feels like such a detail to me, that she had to be summoned by name. She had to make that much of an impression. So number 4, harem life, just a little bit. We're going to see this in the homework for this week too, but I just wanted to add a little bit. It's estimated, or they're guessing, that there were between 400 and 1,400 women in the harem. And they lived out the rest of their lives in the harem. They were never, it's not like you were dismissed and sent back home. They were waiting, they just spent the rest of their lives waiting for a summons for the king. Any man who was caught trying to befriend one of these women, it was considered an act of treason against the crown, and they were executed. So your life was over. It became this harem. Any children that were made would be raised as illegitimate children of the king, meaning that they weren't eligible to be in line for the throne, but they were given high up positions in the government. So why do you think they would do that? Because the king wanted to be surrounded by people who were loyal to him, right? So that was a pretty common practice back then. And by the way, lest we think that it was just the girls who were being picked on, history records that about 500 boys, young boys, were taken every year and made eunuchs. to take care of the harem and the king and all that. So if you've got all of these hundreds of women and then hundreds of young boys every year, like it kind of took away from the marriage pool. So when you were single, did you think it was hard to find someone to, yeah. They had a hard time too. All right, verse 15. Now when it reached the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his daughter to go into the king, she did not seek anything except what Haggai, the king's eunuch who kept charge of the women, said. And here's this thought again. And Esther advanced in favor in the eyes of all who saw her. Verse 16. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus to his royal house in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. So there's that time marker for us, okay? So, point C here, when the king's happy, everybody's happy. Verse 17, and the king loved Esther more than all the women. And I looked that word loved up, and it meant loved. And again, she advanced in favor and loving kindness before him more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen in place of Vashti. Then the king held a great feast, Esther's feast, for all his princes and his servants. He also held a remission of taxes for the provinces and gave gifts according to the king's hand. So they were, they got a nice little tax write-off that year because of Esther. I'm sure they all appreciated it. All right, Mordecai. So now we're going to go back and learn a little bit more about Mordecai. I'm calling him Mordecai the Protector. Starting in verse 19. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not yet told anyone about her kinsmen or her people, just as Mordecai had commanded her. That word commanded actually means forbid. In the strongest terms that he can, he is forbidding her from telling anyone that she is Jewish. Indeed, Esther was still doing what Mordecai declared that she do, just as she had done when she was younger and was being brought up by him. Mordecai's clearly worried about anyone knowing that she is Jewish. Clearly worried. And this kind of, this seemed interesting to me. Why are they hiding it? I think there's probably a reason why. So I loved in the MacArthur Study Bible, down in his study notes, he said a couple of things that made a little more sense to me, made good sense, actually. He thinks that, there was an anti-Jewish letter, so very anti-Jewish, written by the Samaritans to Ahasuerus several years earlier that maybe had frightened them. So the people of Persia, they're complaining about the Jews who were still there, and it seems like the culture wasn't very happy to have them there, maybe. And then MacArthur also notes that the evil intentions of Haman, who show up in chapter 3, didn't just surface when Mordecai refuses to bow down to him. There's more to the story. And I think Mordecai was reading the room correctly, right? He knew that she just needed, or he felt like she needed to be quiet and not disclose who her people were. So, little more about Mordecai here in verse 21. Mordecai saves the king. In those days, while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs from those who were doorkeepers. So the doorkeepers, like they have access to the king. They're at the doors. They're not like out in the field. They became furious and sought to send forth their hand against King Ahasuerus. So they're going to kill him. But the matter became known to Mordecai. So he told Queen Esther, and Esther said it to the king in Mordecai's name. Then the matter was sought out. They investigated and found it to be true. So they were both hanged on a gallows. And it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the king's presence. So if you've read ahead, right, you know that's going to come back. This detail, this saving the king, is written down somewhere, okay? So just so you know the end of the story, it was maybe 10 or 15 years after this, but King Ahasuerus was assassinated in his sleep by his own people. So we don't get that in Esther, so I feel like I'm not giving anything away. But in the end, he is killed by his own people. So what does that mean that he's sitting? Mordecai he's around, right? He's like there every time you turn around. He's checking on Esther. He's sitting at the king's gate. So what that meant was that he held a position in the king's court. So he had some job there that he did. Karen Job says the gate entering into the walled palace complex was a large building. We think of it as like a little gate, right? It was a building in which legal, civil, and commercial business was transacted. It measured 131 by 92 feet. They know this because they've dug it up. This gate was a large building consisting of a central hall that led into the royal compound and two rectangular side rooms. Anyway, the details of that correspond well to the details of the palace given by the author of Esther. Don't we love it when archaeology backs up what the Bible says? Not that we need it, right? But it's always nice. So Mordecai saves the king. So this very quickly told story illustrates, I think, Mordecai's character for us. We see some things about him. He is the kind of man who would raise his orphan cousin, little baby cousin. He's the kind of man who checks on her every day. He's worried about her. He's the kind of man that would command her silence out of worry for her well-being. Now, we can get into, should they have been hiding there? That's not a detail that we're given. And he's the kind of man who discloses an assassination plot that saves the very king he's afraid of. He still does the right thing. So I love Mordecai. The more I've read about him and thought about him and learned about him, he seems like a good guy. He's doing the right things. All right, so in conclusion, think about all the providence of God, the hand of God that we've seen specifically in Esther and also in Mordecai. Anyone, can you think of point some out to me? We've got about 1 minute. Susan's going, we're over.
Well, Esther kept finding favor.
Esther kept finding favor. Mm-hmm. Yep, good. Yeah. She kept finding favor.
I just happened to be there when he overheard this to you.
Yes, yes. Mordecai just happened to overhear the plot to kill the king. That's a great one. There's so many. Y'all, Esther lost her parents at some point in her life. That would have been terrible, right? So that would have been so hard. But she had Mordecai to raise her. That's just the good, sweet providence of God putting the orphan into a family. So we could go on and on, right? But I think you can see where I'm headed with this. It'll come up in the homework. Remember, I'm trying to tee you up for a home run in the homework. And then I want to leave us with this question, and I'll pray. So where are you seeing the providence of God in your life? Esther would not have said, I have an easy life. But in the course of a few verses, she goes from being an orphan to being the queen of Persia. That's the hand of God. And Mordecai goes from being this outcast, and now he's got a good job with the government and is able to still take care of Esther and look out for her. Wonderful ways that we see the providence of God, and we'll see it in our own lives too. All right, let me pray. God, we're humbled and thankful and grateful for your hand, that you didn't just create us and leave us. In our own lives, you show such care of all of us, and we're grateful. I don't even have words. You've done so many good things in my life. We are thankful. I pray that this week for our homework that we'll be able to dig into your providential hand even more. Give us a good week. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.